endurance factor at this point. And so, of course, my endurance is being tested, and specifically my ability to endure not killing myself with my grenade launcher. That's still not an ability I have successfully developed. The hobgoblins are really dangerous, like literally 3 hits and you die, and most of it is constantly moving, constantly having to work on the mechanics. So I mean, overall, as you know, the final encounter of a dungeon, I will say it's pretty good, pretty hectic, and definitely intense. All right, the next dungeon on our list, my list, is Prophecy. Enter the realm of the Nine and ask the question, what is the nature of the darkness? Since this dungeon takes place before Beyond Light and during Shadowkeep, we haven't been yet introduced to any of the darkness subclasses, aka stasis. So this dungeon is in turn asking the question and will have us deal with darkness as a concept. So that's good to take note of before I head into the dungeon. It's also interesting that this has to do with the Nine. So our first introduction to the darkness isn't even through the Witness, it's through this other mysterious force.
A warlock and a dredgen ask the question.
What is the darkness?
Our answer lies before you. Leave mercy behind.
Pretty vague. Leave mercy behind is pretty ominous of a saying, though. It is interesting. Well, it's actually pretty cool that, you know, the emissary calls us a warlock, since we are, of course, or I am playing as a warlock. It's also interesting to hear the emissary use the phrase dredgen when referring to the drifter, which is pretty neat to see the drifter make an appearance here. They don't really have any bigger role in the dungeon, but it is interesting to note that the drifter is attached to the lore of the Nine, which is probably a place to focus that the story is going to head towards now that the Witness has been dealt with. We start off in some sort of Stargate. The location is unknown, but it doesn't really matter as we are sucked into another unknown location.
Go back to yelling at that tree on Io.
You need a handler, Rat, and the Guardian needs support.
Suit yourself, Three Eyes.
All right, we get some banter between Eris and Drifter. Pretty interesting. I mean, it's not really that interesting, to be honest. You know, I have to say something about it. As I move towards the end of the tunnel, I, of course, observe the location. The path forward is blocked, and I obviously take note of the 2 platforms with dark and light energy jutting out from it. We go ahead and enter the tunnel in order to take care of the Taken Knights, which I understand as the enemy of this group. Taken overall as an enemy type are probably on the easier side, definitely, you know, grim. But in any case, obviously, with the path forward blocked, I have to figure out what I need to do to go forward. And defeating these Taken Knights drop some motes, which obviously indicate to me are the mechanic of what I need to do in order to progress, and they probably have to do with the beams of light. So, of course, with this having to do with the Drifter, seeing the Gambit Light mechanic return is very neat. And ties in with the lore, of course. And of course, another thing tying in with the lore are how the walls absorb enemies and their drops. Nice to see that there are no glitches in this dungeon. Very cool. So with a finalized darkness mote, I try to take it over to the beam of darkness. I assumed it would just auto-complete, but no, it took me a little bit longer in order to figure out what I needed to do in order to submit the mote into the beam of light. Of course, with the darkness mote finalized, I need to collect some light motes. And while I get the light motes to drop, I don't fully understand the mechanical difference of why the lightness and darkness ones drop. Of course, I figured it out pretty quickly as I noticed a giant shaft of light pouring out from one of the holes in the wall. And now that I am paying attention to the light shaft, I also hear a pretty obvious sound effect that indicates to me that there is something going on. So with this, I presume that this is the difference between what allows me to generate the light motes and darkness motes. So figuring that out allows me to go ahead and finalize my light mote properly, and this way I actually know what the mechanic is moving on forward, because, you know, while I lucked out, all right, the Taken Knight really rushed me down and killed me, but no, doesn't really matter. Rip flawless, but I don't think I was going for flawless anyways. But you know, while I did luck out in how I generated the motes initially, figuring out the mechanic is definitely more important, as I presume that I will have to use it later on in the dungeon, because if I don't, that would be really, really dumb to introduce a mechanic that does not come back. But when it's dealing with the themes of light and darkness, you know, being in the light or being in the dark makes appropriate sense, and honestly is a pretty cool and unique mechanic. I don't think there's been anything like it, or I haven't experienced or encountered anything quite like this mechanic. So pretty cool, I'm not gonna lie. The second room is more of the same, of course. This time around, generating the darkness motes is a little bit harder, but you know, being a bit more strategic about where I'm standing is honestly a good change of pace, and you know, encounter design makes you think. But I mean, not that much thinking, to be honest. Like, it's still pretty simple to complete. The musical effect is pretty nice as we cross the door, and I notice the big bad dude, probably the boss, in front of us. Of course, I ignore them as they disappear and continue down the tunnels, while this third chamber is empty. The fourth chamber, or at least the passageway to the fourth chamber, is still accessible. And while there are some spooky sound effects, there is ultimately nothing anywhere. I even go ahead and look up the shafts. I shoot the balls, you know. Is there some sort of secret back here? Maybe. Am I well equipped to find it? Not at this current time. So, of course, with me finding nothing, I go ahead and head back and continue upwards. You know, jumping across, I go ahead and follow the red lights. I even jump into the little thing just in case there's something I have to do with it. But nope, they're just ominous red lights. Jumping up in order to chase after the enemy takes us to our first restricted light zone. Our objective is to defeat a Phalanx Echo, which, you know, is very annoying sounding. So what I do first is take note of my surroundings, and as I jump onto these golden platforms, I actually notice that these shafts lead to the rooms directly below us. So I think with strand or the proper sword movement technique, you could actually just skip the beginning rooms and head straight up to this boss section immediately, which is actually a pretty cool shortcut. You know, it's pretty nice to see the interconnectivity of the dungeon, and being able to skip a rather like a mechanic introductory section is a pretty cool time save, not gonna lie. All right, I quickly gather my bearings before placing down the first rally banner of this section, because it's the first proper encounter that I have to face. Of course, as I notice the beams of light and darkness energy, I realize that, you know, I'm gonna have to repeat the mechanic from before, this time just multiple times over. And I also have to deal with a Phalanx Echo, which is especially annoying because this platform is designed to be especially prone to being knocked off of. I don't really have a strategy for what order to grab the light or darkness modes. It's pretty much just kill whatever, wherever I am, and then go from there. So as I deposit one of the motes, the rings around the arena actually change the lighting conditions, which is another pretty cool feature, as it changes up the battlefield location, which makes it a bit more challenging to grab light or darkness motes. Of course, the real challenge is not falling off the edge of the arena myself. I somehow managed to not do so. You know, collisions managed to work in my favor, and so far it's not too bad of an encounter. Just repeating the mechanics over and over again while playing safe and making sure I don't die. Honestly, the cover is not too bad. The Phalanx is also not that much of a problem. I will say having a buddy in terms of the turret next to me and the Bleak Watcher turret to freeze stuff. Makes things incredibly easy. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty strong ability. And with all the beams deposited, go ahead and enter DPS phase. Of course, I'm trying to activate my bait and switch proc on my edge transit, but because the Phalanx Echo has a giant shield, it's a little bit awkward for me to get the necessary triggers. So I fail at doing so, but even without the proper bait and switch procs, with the addition of my super, I managed to do a pretty good chunk of damage, and I knock it down to half health, or just a little bit above half health. So if I can execute my damage rotation a little bit smoother the second time around, I can go ahead and knock it out in 2 phases, which is what I plan on doing, because having to repeat another 3rd phase of this is really annoying. Because while I make it look easy, that's only because I'm not dying. Because if I die at any point, obviously I'm gonna have to reset the progress, and having to reset the progress means I'm gonna repeat this section over and over again, and that is a more stressful job than it looks like. You know, having Devour proc over and over again, regenerating my HP, makes things substantially easier, but if you're paying close attention to my health bar, it's not like I'm managing it the best, and I do take a ton of damage. Like, if it wasn't for Devour constantly regenerating me HP, probably would be dead many times over, but, you know, Devour is a part of the Warlock kit, so we take what we can get. It's also really good that there's a bunch of really weak Scions that allow me to constantly maintain my grenade energy and allow me to constantly keep spawning in my buddies, or else with just the Knights and no Scions, this would be infinitely more annoying, because it's not like my turrets can kill the Taken Knights easily. But aside from that, go ahead and prop Prismatic, which I didn't really do at all during the fight, mainly because the location required me to kill the Taken Knights in a certain order, which is just something that is a lot harder to do with Prismatic nades. And also spawning the Knights is really important, especially when the Phalanx Echo can just knock me off the edge like that. And with that, 2 phases entirely wasted. And now I have to repeat damage, I have to repeat gathering the motes, repeat staying alive, and yeah, so while the first phase went pretty well by all accords, or my first attempt rather, in first phase by that standard, the fact that I have to repeat it makes this really annoying. Alright, gathering motes, I mean, there's nothing really that changes mechanic wise, so it's more about, after figuring out what you need to do, it's more about can you do it, and if you can do it once, you can probably just do it, you know, as many times as you need to. It's more about the endurance factor at this point. And so, of course, my endurance is being tested, and specifically my ability to endure not killing myself with my grenade launcher. That's still not an ability I have successfully developed. Beginner's luck beginning to run out, I'm afraid so, because that time was it wasn't even any of the enemies that killed me, it was myself, you know. I have to pause and recoil and take a deep breath, realizing my mistake, because, like, oh my god, because, you know, the Phalanx pushing me off the edge is something that I'm gonna have to get over, but me killing myself with my own grenade launcher is a completely avoidable error that I need to not do. That will be the death of me in much worse positions. Alright, you know how it is, just complete the modes and then enter damage phase. This time around, I still fail at activating bait and switch, which is the biggest issue I have with this boss fight. If I can, okay, I say biggest issue I have with this boss fight, obviously that's not true, but biggest issue I have in damage phase, and that's managing to activate bait and switch and then getting my grenade to actually, you know, hit it and not just land on its shield, or me doing really minimal splash damage. Because even though I managed to activate Bin Switch, I did less damage than I did the first time around I ever encountered the boss, which means that this is certainly a 3-phase. Gotta save myself real quick from falling off the edge. And I almost died to the knight pushing me. Really have to be careful of those knights. They do a surprising amount of damage when they catch up to you. But yeah, the second time around, the arena has also changed its lighting, and that makes collecting light and darkness motes pretty annoying. And oh my god, of course the Phalanx pushes me off the edge of the map, and I was pretty close that time around to not dying, but I couldn't save myself for that two more seconds in order to phase back. Wow, that's tough. I mean, I knew this was gonna be the problem with this boss fight, and it's gonna have to be getting over that Phalanx Echo, just pushing you off the map and resetting your progress. It's a struggle. All right, this time around, I know a bit more of where the knights are spawning in, so I take a bit more of a calculated position. It's basically where I've been playing the entire time, but this time around, I've decided to, work on killing the knights in a much more calculated way in order to not waste as much time just dealing with the ads for no reason, because even though I can, it behooves me to do this process as fast as possible, since I'm gonna have to do it at least 3 times if I'm unable to successfully do as much damage as I can during damage phase. In record time, I've literally completed all 4 of the finalized modes basically inhumanly fast. Of course, the Phalanx Echo pushes me off. I managed to find a edge to jump off of and find myself back in the arena. Really don't want to waste damage phase time. So of course, this would happen during damage phase, but since I already calculated that I would probably have to do 3 phases, this one being, less, it doesn't really matter if I don't maximize my damage potential if I've already gone ahead and cemented the fact that I'm going to be doing 3 damage phases, because as long as I get through 1 of the segments, I'm good to go for the other 2, because realistically that 3rd phase is only to do what, like 100,000 damage, which realistically I should not ever have to enter the 3rd phase. But being efficient with my damage rotations is not a skill set that I have fully developed, especially not when I'm hectically trying to also do the belt mechanic. But in due time, hopefully this process will smooth itself out, and I will manage to only need to rely on a single phase. I don't think a single phase, sorry, 2 phases. I was gonna say, I don't know if a single phase would be possible. Maybe with a different build, but probably not with my build. Like, I don't think I have enough burst damage because of Song of Flame. Like, if I was using a different Warlock Super, perhaps, but most of them aren't really burst damage, huh? Oh, I guess Nova Bomb. So I guess if I was using a Nova Bomb build, 1 phase might be possible, but that's for a different me to worry about. Here, I'm just trying to survive, and honestly, it's a bit easier the second time around because, it's not really my first attempt anymore. I've now done this loop like 10 times, which is just a process. All right, here we are, 2nd damage phase. I almost get instantly pushed off by the Phalanx Echo, but I managed to not activate Bane Switch, but of course I carry on and just spam fire my grenade launcher anyways, because I figure, it's just important to do as much damage as possible. Of course, I have Bane Switch activated this time around, but doesn't really matter. It doesn't seem like I'm going to be able to do enough damage. I almost get pushed off because the Phalanx is in a awkward position. Song of Flame allows me to do a decent chunk of damage. Unfortunately, the Phalanx Echo does survive with just a sliver of its total health, which means that, if my first damage phase was a little bit more successful, I probably would not need to repeat this mechanic a 3rd time. But honestly, this time around, it's not really any more difficult or any easier. Actually, I probably would say it probably is a little bit more difficult, simply because, like I said, with no science, I was gonna say with the no scions, it's actually a little bit harder for me because I don't have I don't have weak enough enemies for my grenade buddy to infinitely kill and chain grenade energy off of. So even though I'm in prismatic with that damage reduction, actually I'm out of prismatic anyways, but the Taken Knights, when they encroach upon you, can really dish it out. Like, wow. They went through 2 whole damage phases and still get taken out. It's pretty rough. That's tragic. Boss damage 2.36 million. I'm what? Needed to do like 140 more. Man, that's tough, you know. That one hurts. That one, I was so close, yet so far, because now I need to repeat everything. And that's the tough part you have to get over. The fact that you have to repeat everything upon death. It's just it really is a test of endurance. Unfortunately, I don't even get to damage phase as I'm completely blasted into oblivion before I can even deposit a moat. Yikes. The following attempt is just as pathetic because I don't even get flown off. I just fall. Really, I mean, you know, I need that beginner's luck to come back. We can't be having this. We cannot be dying like this, although I'd rather die, you know, at the beginning of the encounter rather than dying all the way at the end when I'm 100,000 damage away, but it is what it is. In my haste to, you know, get it over with as fast as possible, I get a little bit too greedy and just die to a Scion for the first time. You know, even though the Devour is really strong and my buddies are really powerful, it doesn't mean I'm invincible, and I still need to make sure I stay in cover and don't just run out into, you know, the middle of the combat arena with no cover. So, you know, even though I'm incredibly powerful, I still have to make sure that, you know, I play safe and not get too ahead of myself. The Phalanx Echo pushes me off at the very beginning of this encounter, but there are certain sections on the edge of the map that do allow myself to regain my bearings, so I'm able to find myself back onto the platform with no issues. So it is good to know that, you know, if I get pushed off by the Phalanx Echo, if I'm smart enough about my positioning, I could manage to knock myself onto a piece of the, you know, surrounding wall that allows me to not die and preserve my attempt. All right, I managed to complete 2 entire and now 3 entire rotations of depositing the moats and kill the Phalanx Echo on my 3rd time. Realistically, it really should not have come down to me, you know, having to enter a 3rd phase in order to do 100,000 damage against the Phalanx, but me missing that 100,000 damage, it causes me to waste, you know, another like 5 minutes. But luckily, after that death that time around, nothing too exciting happens, and that allows me to, you know, deposit the moats without too much trouble. And, you know, Song of Flame allows me to instantly kill the Phalanx. So yeah, honestly, overall, as an encounter, pretty annoying. Yeah, I mean, I like the mechanic. The Phalanx pushing me off the edge of the map is no fun though. I mean, I know that's definitely part of the challenge and part of the design encounter, but I mean, I can still think it's incredibly cringe that that is the way that the combat encounter is designed to make you die, or part of the challenge is to just, you know, get flung off the map. I mean, I guess you know, it is a challenge, but is it a good one? No. But, you know, the mechanic part of collecting the moats, along with, you know, the stage and overall design, makes up for, you know, the cringe factor. So overall, pretty fun encounter. And, you know, the light and darkness collection mode for the moats is pretty unique. So after collecting our loot, continue forward, and we drop down a void and enter the Wasteland. Immediately, there's no obvious objective markers, so, you know, it's clear that we're meant to wander off on our own and be lost for a while. Of course, as I notice the red light, I head towards it because, you know, it's different. So there's probably it's probably indicative of something, but turns out I was lied to. Of course, the Minotaur I killed earlier is also probably, you know, indicative of something. So I decide to head in its direction, and I notice another one in the distance. Of course, as I, you know, basically ignore it, I notice the Taken Blights and the Hobgoblin Snipers and this is probably more indicative of what I need to do. So go ahead and take out the Taken, Thrall, and Blights with my Aberrant Action, which is a pretty nifty rocket sidearm that I crafted from last season. Really fills out my kit because the Bergloss Curve is really good for ad clear, but I always struggled with having a proper secondary single damage weapon, and I would always resort to using a Waveframe Boom. As I jump into the little Spectre, it goes towards a different location. I didn't want to run around this entire location, so I checked to see if I could spawn a vehicle, because I was like, it would be really useful if I could just spawn in my Sparrow and not have to run around this entire empty barren wasteland. And so I can summon my vehicle. That's what I do, and I go ahead and drive on over to the next location. And basically, we just have to repeat this process of taking care of the Blights and then following the Spectre around. I mean, I guess it exists. It's like it's a failure location in between the encounters. All right, after doing that 4 times, yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 4 times. Maybe I miscounted. We follow it towards the final location and enter this temple. The light works are fantastic. This might have been when the lighting rework was introduced, so this might have been part of also why all of these lighting mechanics were brought in. Of course, this is now the location of our second encounter, following the electric or the Spectre forward, as that's probably definitely part of the mechanic. But as I do so, it actually heads in a different direction than when the direction I saw it head towards, right? So noticing that it went towards the other beam of light, I decided that, I should probably follow wherever the Spectre is going and not where it initially led me, because the location of wherever the little Spectre is probably more important to note than wherever I saw it go to, basically. Or at least that's what I'm saying right now, having completed a dungeon. But at the time, apparently, initially, I was like, nah, you know what? Fuck it. Let me just follow the initial direction of wherever the Spectre followed and not look at where the Spectre is on the wall. So everything I just said about me following where the Spectre is on the wall, let's go ahead and pretend you did not hear that. Right now, we're gonna go ahead and pretend that commentary happens in the next 2 minutes. But as of now, I'm taking note of the location. The Spectre, for some reason, is on the ceiling, and like, bro, how am I supposed to get on there? I waste some time, jumping on top of all these boxes in order to get to the very top, but I don't find anything. As for this location, it's clear. Okay, it's not exactly clear, but I'm pretty sure this box is just the room we're in is at least rotating on its sides over and over again, and that is what facilitates the different arenas that we fight in. For the enemies, we basically have to repeat the same thing over and over again in order to collect the motes by taking care of the Scions. We then have to take care of the Hobgoblins, which are especially dangerous of an enemy type. The Hobgoblins are really dangerous. Like, literally 3 hits and you die, and it's not fun, So, making sure the Hobgoblins die is the utmost priority. And then after that, you take care of the Knights, making sure that you're in the appropriate section of light or darkness. So here we have a building upon the mechanics. So now we're following the sprite, and as we're following the sprite, we're also following the previous mechanics introduced to us of the light and darkness, while having to focus on specific enemy types. So all the mechanics are just building all upon each other, so it's a pretty natural progression. The location is also fairly interesting, and having the room spin on top of itself is pretty wacky and disorientating. There's also the entire mystery of what is darkness, first of all, like what are we being led towards, and who specifically is the enemy we saw or that we're chasing after as well. So along with the gameplay mechanics being built on top of, there is also the narrative being built on top of at the same time. The sprite being on the ceiling is really confusing. The last time around, I just went ahead and collected the first type of motes I saw, so this time around I'm just gonna go ahead and do the exact opposite. I'm pretty sure, like, I think I collected light the first time around, so this time I'm gonna go ahead and deposit darkness. Unfortunately, as I try to deposit it, I'm just free pickings for the Hobgoblin, which completely decimates me. Like, the 2 Hobgoblins together do insane amount of damage. Like, they are dangerous. They're more dangerous than the Phalanx Echo from the previous encounter. It's insane how much damage they do. So the second time around, I think I go ahead and just decide to follow the sprites because it went in a completely different direction this time around than it did the first time. So it probably just makes sense to follow the sprite. So, you know, we're just gonna go ahead and continue with the light and darkness mechanic. Of course, as I try to deposit a darkness mode, the hobgoblin takes me out. Like, I'm not joking. These hobgoblins are nasty. So as I get beamed up the third time around, I actually mess up my glide and I fall and have a misadventure. So confirmed, if you fall into any of these pits, you do just instantly die. So, you know, it's rather annoying that happened, but it's good that I discovered this at a rather early point in time. So could have been way worse if I fell into a pit or tried to explore a pit, you know, when it was like towards the end of the encounter. But all right, after depositing the light mode, I assume that, you know, the little ads will disappear, but they don't as I try to ascend and they take me out. So apparently the ads can kill you and not despawn, or the ads cannot despawn and will kill you. So in the future, I guess I just need to make sure that I take care of the ads, you know, that don't despawn. I just assumed that they would automatically despawn because they always did, but not all ads. My next death is pretty embarrassing because I literally just basically walk off the edge of the map. Like, sure, taking hobgoblin hits me once, but I kill it and I just walk off the edge of the map. Like, this is actually so sad. I just walk off. I just walk off. Hate to see it. You know, that one's particularly embarrassing. Yikes. After enough emotes are deposited, we are then taken into the next section of this encounter. I'm not too sure what is the requirement that allows us to progress forward so we can take out these Centurion Echoes. I don't know if we have to deposit the light and darkness modes in a certain order, or if we have to do them a certain amount of time. And I still never figured out what I'm supposed to do when the sprite is at the center. I just deposit it in like, you know, whatever random ass area I needed to. And there was also a time where the sprite just completely disappeared, and I assumed that was some sort of marker for progression, but I had no idea what it was indicative of because I had to continue repeating the loop over and over again. But eventually, after enough time, you know, the Centurion Echoes, by the way, no joke here, but, you know, after enough loops of this area, we complete this encounter. Like, the Centurion Echoes, no joke. That second one almost killed me. Luckily, I managed to stay alive, but those Axiom darts are no joke. So we have to continue forward, and down the red lit tunnel is a dead end and an instant death. So, you know, wasn't really going for flawless, but it was already over with. So I don't know why I'm bringing it up again here. But our way forward, I assume, if it's not behind us, is probably forward. You know, that's also not really the case. I also took a look, you know, at the bottom underneath wherever I needed to go. But go ahead and trying to find a way out is a little bit more troublesome than what I first would assume. Of course, you know, it takes me, you know, another couple more seconds to realize that, you know, I should probably just head towards wherever the chest was. And moving on forward, we are traversing through another pink lit narrow corridor. Once again, location of our being is heaven/hell, which is pretty spooky. And as we exit the temple, we return to the wasteland. This time around, we are chasing not a sprite, but the specter of the entity we saw at the very beginning of this dungeon. We follow the sprite into the next temple and continue traversing. This particular pathway/corridor is especially vexing in its design. You know, it's quite geometric, and the lighting is also quite, you know, retro in its pink and blue hue. Moving forward, we are then taken to Singularity, and the view here is quite stunning. Red ribbons are connected to various diamond-shaped, not exactly sure what you would call them, platforms, I suppose, containers. But the absolute spectacle in view of this location is quite breathtaking. It's definitely did not expect something this alien, I should say, you know, to be in this location. While this location is quite the spectacle to behold, traversing towards the main platform and, you know, next area we need to progress towards is quite, you know, annoying, to be honest. Like, I have no idea why this is such a long descent, but I guess it does succeed in fulfilling fulfilling the atmospheric intent of the location. It is quite spooky and, you know, quite fascinating, and definitely makes you wonder what the heck I'm in store for. We're ambushed by a bunch of taken thrall. Our light is still restricted in this section, so if we die, you know, that's pretty bad, but the rather retro looking lighting is quite fascinating as we are now taken towards the final encounter, where we have to defeat the Kell Echo. Before engaging with the encounter proper, you know, I take a note of what I need to do. So there are 3 beams of light as opposed to the typical, or I say the typical, the previous 4 beams of light from the Phalanx Echo encounter. However, instead of an invulnerable Phalanx Echo, we are instead pounded by 3 of the Kell Echoes, each positioned in a corner. Upon depositing the appropriate beam, appropriate moat, a ogre spawns in, and, you know, that's what we have to take care of. Pressure is also alleviated as the corresponding Kell Echo is also taken care of as well. So this allows us to have a bit more of a safe location to play from, as the bombardment from the Kell Echoes in each corner is quite oppressive. Of course, we still need to follow the previous mechanics of gathering light and darkness motes, while not dying to the Kell Echoes, and while taking care of the ogre that spawns in after the moat is deposited. So we're building upon the gameplay mechanics previously introduced, and it's pretty annoying, I'm not gonna lie. The ogres are no joke, and the Kell Echoes just in each corner constantly spamming us with non-stop attacks is quite hectic. Like, there's never a moment where I'm like not taking damage, and that makes for a pretty messy encounter. Of course, you know, the mechanic of moat collection and delivery is pretty simple, and I'm not gonna lie, not having to worry about being pushed off the edge of the map is a saving grace. So after completing all of the encounters, I go ahead and drop down and am able to face off the Kell Echo. I get hit by the darkness attack, which is pretty annoying. Obviously, I don't want to be getting hit with that, as it seems to push me back. What I do notice is the dark entropy buff building at the top of my screen. However, I'm not exactly sure how I'm supposed to mitigate such a debuff. Of course, I noticed attacks building whenever I got hit by the attack, so like now in my mind, getting hit by that attack is like basically a death sentence, mainly because I don't know how I'm supposed to counter the dark entropy debuff. So this was a rather unsuccessful damage phase. However, I did at least get to damage phase. 1.1 million damage. I mean, the damage phase barely started. You know, I got hit and blasted off pretty fast. So it wasn't a proper full damage phase, but at least I know I can get to damage phase, and I know the, you know, steps on how I'm supposed to get there. If this is the only type of encounter I have to deal with, you know, I feel like I'm in the clear. Of course, I am majorly worried about, you know, the total amount of health the Kell Echo has, because, you know, if I did 1.1 million damage right there, this is what, gonna be like a 5-phase boss. If, you know, I take note of, you know, maybe I do another million damage throughout the rest of the platforms we have to traverse across. It's like, what, 5 phases? I'm like, oh man, I have to prepare for the long haul, you know. This really is a test of endurance. All right, even though I deposit the moat second time around, I get absolutely blasted by the ogre. Like, it pushes me directly into the Kell Echo, who just melees me. So it just, you know, can't even let my guard down for even a second for any type of enemy, because the ogre capitalized on that 1 second. I was like, oh, let me, you know, not attack it. As I try to spawn in my turret, it blasts me all the way to the other side of the map, perfectly into the hands of the Kell Echo. So this is still, you know, a pretty brutal arena that you have to survive in order to even get to the boss damage phase in the first place. Alright, with all the modes deposited, I go ahead and drop down second time around. So I spawn in my buddy, but I realize that it's probably way too far back, which is really, really bad for me. So that's just something I keep in to take note of, you know, the next time I'm down here, or next times I'm going to be down here doing damage. Make sure I spawn my turret, not at the beginning of the encounter. I'm also trying to make sure I pace myself and figure out the rhythm of those darkness blasts, because I'm trying not to get hit by them. Also figuring out the, you know, distance I need to sidestep towards. I'm not too sure how long the damage phase is, so I'm panicking, and when I send off all my shots, like, I'm not even making sure I properly aim or anything. I'm just, you know, shooting in a general direction. I activate my Super Song of Flame in order to get in some extra damage. Unfortunately, I get a little bit lazy and get knocked all the way back. This is also where I noticed that the Dark Entropy debuff stacks actually decrease the closer I get back to the Kell Echo, so there's clearly some sort of distance I need to be within in order to, you know, not die from the Dark Entropy stack. So after that is a completed damage phase of the Kell Echo. So looking at it, it seems like, you know, it's definitely going to 4 phases if I'm a little bit lucky, if I smooth out my damage rotation a little bit more, but probably 5 phases is what I'm looking at. Of course, as I'm taken into the next arena, or the next rotation for the mote depositing before I can enter damage phase, I noticed that the arena has completely shifted, so there are multiple arenas that I will have to navigate and collect the motes from. That's another cool, you know, neat feature. I mean, seeing that the arena changes really also makes you have to vary up your general approach. The ogres here also have a lot more visible space, and trying to not die to them is pretty hectic. I also completely forgot that they spawned in, so I have to deal with 2 of them at the same time, which is definitely something I need to make sure I do not need to worry about in the future. So just have to remember that the ogres do spawn in. Of course, when I'm prismatic up, you know, and I have all my stuff procced, I'm not too worried about dying to anything. I don't even bother with the 3rd ogre, and I just drop down in order to begin the next damage phase. Alright, go ahead and try that fail up activating bin switch while I work down the timing of dodging the darkness blast, and of course I die as I fail to jump back to the main platform. Wow, how does that happen? Nice. Okay, so as I was turning around, I just, you know, I just did not have the amount of velocity I needed for the jump to even let me grab onto the platform. Like, hello, my hands don't even want to grab onto the edge of the platform, and I don't even fall down that far before dying. I mean, there's no chance for me to ever get back up, but wow, that is that's embarrassing. Also, this is also where I do notice that there is a ring, you know, with the Kell Echo being the epicenter, which, you know, is obviously indicative to me of where the Dark Entropy debuff starts to stack on. So that is pretty brutal. I mean, dying not to the Kell Echo or to any of the ads, but to me missing my own jump is pretty sad. And now that has unlocked a new fear when it comes to damage phase, and that is making sure I don't miss any of my jumps on any of the platforms while I'm trying to dodge the attacks. I didn't even think that this was going to be a problem because the platforms were fairly close to each other, but now that is a new anxiety unlocked. So not looking good, especially because I did 4 million damage, and that was only around, you know, halfway through the second damage phase, or not even halfway through second damage phase. So I probably would have done like 5 million. So it's just like The thought of having to repeat these phases for 5 times in a row, and that is if I don't die. So, you know, 6 or 7, 8 times is not even, you know, looking like it might be an impossibility, which is rather annoying because, you know, it's not like this is a short encounter. This is each rotation takes like what, 5 minutes, so that's like 40 minutes minimum, and most of it is constantly moving, constantly having to work on the mechanics. So I mean, overall, as you know, the final encounter of a dungeon, I will say it's pretty good, pretty hectic, and definitely intense, definitely worthy of being a final encounter of a dungeon. Definitely way more hectic compared to Pit of Heresy. And I still have not re-encountered Dolan Karu technically in Shadow Throne, but from what I remember, Dolan Karu, that fight was not really anything to worry about compared to Vorgath, which is a nightmare. Is this as bad as Vorgath? Maybe. I mean, if you take into account that you have to repeat the damage phase a bunch of times, but also I haven't done Vorgath with a proper build or anything, especially not with a Getaway Artist build. So Shadow Throne is probably way easier than this encounter, to be honest, because it's not like you have to worry about damage phase being that much of a lockout, because I could do Vorgath with way worse weapons. Well, here for the Kell Echo, I'm basically using some of the best weapons in terms of, you know, my loadouts. The Aberrant Action is incredibly strong. The Edge Transit with bait and switch is incredibly potent. Vertical Escort obviously really good for ad clear, but it doesn't really make too much sense to mention here. So this damage phase, not too bad. I mean, I realize that the thing I need to work on most is staying alive. So even if I miss out on some damage, it doesn't really matter because I'm happy going through like what, 4 or 5 phases anyways. So even if I miss some damage here or there, it doesn't really matter in the long run, because if I don't do enough damage in the first place, I'm gonna have to do an extra phase that is probably not even extra. I almost died as I came out, as I bounced off. If I bounced to a bad location, I could have straight up fallen to my demise. But here we are, another arena, another location switch up, and this one honestly is one of the easiest arenas to deal with because there's a ton of cover, there's plenty of darks, plenty of lights. All right, here we are, second damage phase time of this encounter. Some pretty sick moves as I Phoenix dive and then sidestep out of the Darkness Blast. I'm also able to play a little bit more aggressive because I now know, you know, the complete trajectory of this encounter, you know, how much time I have, roughly like 30 seconds, roughly where I have to go, roughly where I have to be, roughly the distance of where I need to maintain, and the time I have to maintain. So I managed to go back and collect the ammo. Even though my stacks are adding up, I run into the entry blast over and over again. I'm panicking just a little bit because if I let those stacks accumulate, I will die. But staying alive is definitely more important than doing just a little bit extra damage, especially since I can't even make sure I always maintain bait and switch whenever he's jumping around. So I know that the most opportune phases to activate bait and switch are at the very beginning of the encounter and at the very end of the encounter where he's stationary, or the Kell Echo is stationary. So that is, you know, that also allows me to plan out my method of attack a little bit easier, because I know when jumping between each platforms, I should be more focused on just avoiding and doing a little bit of damage on the side in order to prep me to activate bait and switch in order to do as much damage as I can at the very end of the encounter. Of course, this also lets me know that I need to save a Bleak Watcher turret for the end, but that is a little bit less important. Of course, with the amount of damage I've done, with that being the second phase, it's clear to me that, you know, I can easily do this I could probably do this in 3 phases if I'm, you know, a little bit more optimized with my damage potential. But a 4th phase is looking pretty likely, and honestly, all things considered, that's not too bad. Like, the simple fact that I cannot be blasted off the edge of the map makes, honestly, this encounter a little bit easier than the Phalanx Echo encounter. Of course, the difficult part comes in with, as I'm realizing now that, you know, I am running out of heavy ammo, which is not good, very, very bad, because that completely cripples my damage. So attrition is another factor where the difficulty comes in, along with the endurance of having to complete the encounters. And now we are being locked on resources, because the longer I have to maintain this, the less ammo I have. Of course, I think it came with Act 2. There are some mods, or there's specifically a heavy ammo finder mod that I put on my aberrant action. So here I'm just trying to kill as many things with my secondary as possible in order to spawn as much, or in order to increase the chances I get of dropping heavy ammo. So that is a little technique that I am using in order to prolong this section, because I know if I head towards the Kell Echo immediately, I will just you know, only have Song of Flame to do damage, which is not optimal. So I'm extending this fight out for as long as possible, because as long as they don't deposit the moats, the enemies will continue to spawn in. Of course, I don't want to spend all day, you know, trying to farm for heavy ammo drops. So after I get a couple of bricks, I just can go ahead and continue in, because hopefully I will spawn in a few more during the course of this fight. And of course, as long as I get off like 1 or 2 rotations of bait and switch at transit damage in the beginning and end of the encounter, then it's probably fine. Of course, I did underestimate the amount of heavy ammo I would use. So unfortunately, I'm not able to do the maximum amount of damage. Like here, I'm a little bit after halfway. We're chasing the Kell Echo, and here it reaches the end, but I'm completely out of heavy ammo. And so when I get sent back here, I don't even really care too much, because it's like I've been doing a pretty good job at dodging all the darkness blasts, but because I have no heavy ammo, like me getting hit there basically means nothing. So I was worried about you know, not having enough heavy ammo, and my worries were in fact met, because I missed out on a ton of damage by not having the proper amount of ammo. So this time around, I'm definitely going to make sure I spend a little bit more time to get as much ammo as I need, because if I can't do damage, what is even the point of going to damage phase? Well, I say that, but I accidentally completed the encounter too fast, and no more ads were spawning in. So I am instead stuck with no heavy ammo, which is very bad. Of course, my backup now is to instead, after activating the switch, is just spam Song of Flame, because, you know, hopefully that should do enough damage to, you know, make up for some of my lost heavy ammo shenanigans. Unfortunately, as I realize, I probably could have killed the Kell Echo if I had even any heavy ammo, because that is a amount of health that is easily dealt with. Luckily, the random ad does go ahead and drop some heavy ammo, so I can go ahead and collect 2 bricks. Unfortunately, I need at least 1 to activate bait and switch. I don't even know if that one hit properly. I'm gonna actually go back in time. Let's see how much of damage it does. It did do around 40k, so it did hit, and we did another hit in. So while we did around 80k damage with those two bullets of my heavy ammo, I am in fact missing a considerable amount. So unfortunately, I did not notice the heavy ammo brick next to the Kell Echo until after I already got hit with the Darkness Blast. So had I picked that up, or had I not gotten hit by the Darkness Blast, I might have been able to kill the Kell Echo there, even though I was completely restricted in my heavy ammo use. But instead, I am now forced to complete another rotation of Dunk the Moats, and rather unfortunate. But the Kell Echo is pretty much all but dead as long as I don't mess up, which there is always a chance of. I will say, like, even though this is the final encounter, this moat collection is way easier. These arenas are way easier to deal with than the first encounter with the Phalanx Echo. Like, it's actually like so much easier to navigate these arenas that it's kind of surprising that there's so much cover here. But I guess, you know, like I said, the mitigating factor is how much damage you have to do to the boss. And if you die, you don't have to repeat all these sections. And I think that's part of what is making this section feel a little bit easier, because I already had to go through the pain of having to reset the arena multiple times when I had to deal with the Phalanx Echo. That having to repeat basically a section where I only need to grab 3 motes is not as much of a challenge. Or it's something I'm more used to. And I guess, you know, this is the enemy encounter, and I know that, you know, this is the end is in sight. It's also having that marker of progression that's also completely motivating to me. But yeah, honestly, the arena is just completely easier to navigate, and only having to grab 3 of the motes is also makes the task much simpler. It is just funny that, you know, I struggled more with the Phalanx Echo than I am here with the Kell Echo. I guess I suppose I could talk about, you know, the implications of this being what echoes even are. I guess if we're talking about, you know, the specific modification of whatever kind of taken they are, or perhaps an echo is specifically a 9 specific variant of a creature that is created specifically for the purpose of this dungeon. That could also be the case. You know, I'm not too sure what the lore behind echoes are, but it being a Kell Echo is probably has pretty interesting lore implications. Like, we know most of the Kells, but who is this mysterious Kell? Is it one that lost to time, or is it someone that we might know? In any case, that is the death of the Kell Echo brings about the end.
The 9 have spoken. That's your answer. That's incomprehensible.
I mean, that's just your opinion, man. No, I think this made sense.
Which part?
Well, we got paid, didn't we?
We have research to conduct, Rat. You drag the Guardian into another mess like this, and I'll push you through an airlock.
I assume the rather large figure in front of us is the emissary. Pretty unique model, as we were taken to some sort of location. Regarding the answer we received, it seems like, you know, the answer was the dungeon itself. We're supposed to receive some sort of answer from that, because it's not like we received a specific line of dialogue, unless that line of dialogue was somehow cut off. But it seems like the dungeon itself and, you know, what we traverse through and by means of gameplay was specifically the answer, and it's up to us to interpret the darkness, or the answer that we received of what is the darkness, however we decide to do so. I agree with Eris here, with that being completely incomprehensible. Like, I'm not even sure if my interpretation of what the answer is supposed to be is correct. Like, I don't know if I'm missing a line of dialogue and the emissary actually said something and I just didn't hear it, or if I'm correct and the dungeon itself is supposed to be, you know, the answer to whatever we needed. I guess maybe the Kell Echo was supposed to be the answer. I'm not sure what you know, that exactly means. I guess the Kell Echo could have been a signifier for Aramis. And so what is the darkness? And the Kell Echo is signifying that, you know, we were going to fight like Aramis. And then, you know, because as we defeated Aramis, we got stasis. I don't know. That's the best I got at this point in time. Pretty vague. Do not agree with the Drifter at all. This definitely did not make sense. And yeah, overall, pretty cool dungeon. I definitely like the vibes. The lighting was excellent. The mechanic of the light and darkness motes and how you collected them was also pretty unique. Like, I assume I'll probably encounter some more unique mechanics as I progress through the dungeons and raids, but playing with the lighting was not something that I thought of, even though I went into the encounter with thinking about how light and darkness is going to be played with. The physical manifestation of how it appears through gameplay was not something I thought of, and finding that out and working out that mechanic at the very beginning was pretty cool, and seeing it used throughout the entire dungeon is also pretty neat. So definitely like the theme of the dungeon. Not satisfied with the answer, but you know, that's just how it's gonna be.